Welcome everybody, thank you for being here tonight. Thank you to the PTSA for organizing this, and of course to all the candidates for stepping up to run for the Board of Education. My name is Gavin New, I'm the co-publisher of the Sag Harbor Express, and I will help moderate along with my wife, Catherine, who is the editor of the paper. We're using a traditional debate format tonight. Each candidate will start with a 2-minute opening statement. The order representing from left to right is how their names will appear on the ballot. Afterwards, we will ask the candidates as many questions as we can get in tonight. Some have been prepared by the Express, others were submitted either through a survey we sent out or through the PTSA. And as Nancy mentioned, if anybody has any questions that they'd like to submit right away for this evening, they can write it down on a card and pass it up to us. We will only ask questions that can be answered by all the candidates and questions that do not pertain to specific personnel. Each candidate will have 2 minutes to answer each question, and we'll have 2 1-minute rebuttal cards, which we've given you guys each 2 little cards that say rebuttal. That you can either add an additional response to somebody else's answer or use the opportunity to elaborate further on your 2-minute answer. So just hold up your card and we'll say, well, there you get another minute, or you can choose to respond to somebody else's answer. Please also speak directly into the microphone. If you kind of sit back, we won't be able to hear you. Most importantly, we want this to be an informative and productive, so we do ask everyone to remain respectful, reserve the applause until the end of the debate, and we only have roughly 90 minutes and a lot of ground to cover, so let's get started, and Catherine will get us started with the questions.
Okay, Yorgos, I'm going to start with you, and I'm going to go straight into a budget question. This was actually submitted to us. The number of students is now, or will soon begin with...
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry about that.
Sorry about that. So, Yorgos, we'll start with your 2-minute opening statement.
Okay, great. Hello, Sag Harbor families and community. I would like to thank the PTSA and the Sag Harbor Express for organizing this event. My name is Yorgos Tsibiridis, and I'm running for the Board of Education for the Sag Harbor School District. 3 years ago, we chose to make Sag Harbor our home and raise our children here. We moved here because of the excellent school and to be members of a year-round, vibrant community out east. I have 2 children. My older son, Athan, he's in 3rd grade at Mrs. Johnston and Mrs. Cadillac's class. And my youngest one, Julius, he will start kindergarten this fall in the school. Education always played a big part in my life and helped shape who I am today and what I have achieved. I wanted to be involved and contribute to the Sag Harbor School as soon as I moved to the community by joining the policy committee. Over the last 3 years that I've been member of the policy committee, we developed several of the critical policies that were adopted. Through this experience, I had the opportunity to work with community members, existing board members, teachers, and the administrators, and develop new policies for the school, where I pushed for change by challenging existing policies, looking at best practices, and recommending new policies. On a more tactical level, I have strong budgeting, forecasting, and financial experience for Fortune 500 companies, and I have an MBA in finance from Columbia Business School, where I also serve on the Board of Admissions. My financial background will help with analyzing and supervising the annual budget and bring more transparency and understanding of the school's financial conditions, the budgets, and the capital projects to the community. Our school teachers and administrators have been doing a great job by creating a positive and nurturing culture at the school, and our educational programs are truly stellar. While we continue doing what we do great at the school, we have to think about the future and what needs our students will have in the future. Thank you, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Yorgos. Caleb, you have 2 minutes.
Hello, thank you for inviting me here. Can you hear me okay? Mm-hmm. Okay. I've been a resident of Sag Harbor for about 20 years. I have 2 kids in the school. They do wonderfully here. We're thrilled with the environment, the learning. They're in 3rd or 4th grade. I think this community is a very special place. I've seen it grow for 20 years. I've been out here for about 30, but Sag Harbor 20. I think I bring to the table some things that I think would really help in the future. I'm very concerned with engaging the community more, engaging them in a sort of a different way than they've ever been engaged. Right now, you have to go out, first of all, you have to be retired in order to decipher all the articles and all the things that go on through the school. It's just it's a huge workload to understand everything that this school does and works hard to do, usually with a lot of people wondering what's going on and at what time. I think that when you want to get information about the school, you pick up a paper if you have the time, and you read it, or you go online to their website. And there's a ton of information there. I'd be much more inclined to try to help push information to people. So instead of like going to a website and having to decipher where you are, what your interests are, how to get that information, that you would actually know, oh, I'm interested in the budget. That may be my number one concern, or my number one concern might be the curriculum at this level, or bullying, or whatever. All these different topics. I want to make that easier for you to digest and be involved earlier on. I find that people don't get engaged until it's a little bit too late. You know.
Thank you, Caleb. Thank you. It's 2 minutes of that. Chris?
Hi, I'm Chris Tice. I want to thank the PTSA for organizing this, the Manus for being our MCs and questionnaires, and to all of you for coming. This is actually, I've been to these now for, I think, about 14 years. This is one of the bigger turnouts, and it's wonderful. So thank you for caring enough and being able to come tonight. I first started coming out to Sag Harbor part-time in the mid-60s, moved out here full-time about 15 years ago. I'm absolutely passionate about public education. My father was a public school teacher for 40 years. Both my sisters were teachers. One is still a first grade teacher up Island. I'm a product of a great public school system, but I'm so proud of the system that we have here. In my corporate life, I was an executive at Fortune 50 companies like Sony and American Express, and that experience has been served me well on my 9 years serving on the board, whether it has to do with hiring and managing executives, to contract negotiations, staffing issues, budget issues, so it has served me really well. I got involved with the school system pretty quickly when we moved out here. I've got 3 daughters, one who graduated in 2013 and did very well here, another one who's a junior at RIT and has benefited from here, and my youngest daughter is in 11th grade. After we moved out here, I got involved in the PTA, was co-president of the PTA, and also was selected to serve on a committee to hire one of the assistant principals. I served on many committees. I then went to almost every board meeting for 2 years because I was thinking of running, and watching a video or reading a newspaper article is not the same as understanding what it means to be on the board, so serving on committees and coming. And then I was fortunate enough to get the support to serve on the board as of 9 years ago, and I've been serving since. I'm really proud of the progress we've made in these 9 years. I think we had a really good school district that has gotten even so much better. During that time, we've added academic rigor through programs like the IB program, the International Baccalaureate, through more STEM-related programs. We've had a variety of bond-related projects, like this auditorium, and there's more. So,
Thank you, Chris. Brian?
Thank you to BTSA and everyone who put this together. The news, I see you quite often from the other side of the table, so it's another night for that. But seriously, I moved out here with my wife more than 10 years ago. When we moved out here, we didn't have any children. We now have a daughter who's in Miss Romeo's class. I'm an attorney in the community. Don't dislike us because we're attorneys. People like to say that. Mr. Dudley knows what I'm talking about a lot back there. But I think as an attorney, it offers me a great skill set to serve the board and serve the school in terms of critical thinking, problem solving, and as much as attorneys like to think they're experts at everything, we're not. And what we are experts at, we're experts at finding the right people for the right solution. And I think that's a lot what the school board does. I've had the opportunity and the pleasure to serve for the last few months on the board and get firsthand knowledge of that and see it really about putting the right people in the right place. The school has moved forward and is in a great position. We have great teachers, great faculty, great programming, as Chris said. But I think more can be done. I think we should always strive to do better, strive to do more, and strive to be the example of neighboring communities while balancing the tax burdens and other things on our community, because the community does support the school, and there are a lot of people in the community that support the school that don't have children in the school, so I think that's always important to keep in mind in this job or in this function as a board member. So I would be asking for your vote and asking for your support in this election, and I'm going to cut my time short so we can move on to the real substance as to why we're here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Tom.
Hi, my name is Thomas McErlin, or Mac Lane, depending on what generation you came from in this area. So, before I even get started, I'm a bit of a news junkie, and there's no coincidences. Today, some real sobering news. We had yet another school shooting in Denver, and also the market took a real dive today because of the tariff war with China, which we all pray works out. I'm confident they can work it out, but it's just not good economic news today, and a lot of people got hurt in Denver, Colorado. So with that, they're in my thoughts. I know they're in yours too. I'm a third generation Sag Harbor resident. My grandfather was Pierson High School's first basketball coach, almost 100 years ago. As a matter of fact, it was more than 100 years ago. My dad founded the minor league baseball program for our youth in 1960, which was basically the intramurals for the kids who got cut from Little League. So he wanted everybody to get a chance to play. I myself am a certified New York State boys basketball coach and coached our youth program for over 20 years. And I still help the kids today, to this day, who want to better themselves with their fundamentals. I am also a present member of the Pierson Athletic Committee, helping our AD by supporting his vision for our school athletes. I never quite heard the word student athlete until our AD really impressed upon us a few years ago with that. I was a single dad for many years, and then I married Cindy 21 years ago last week. We have 5 children, 3 grandchildren, two who go to the elementary school. We've had our children in the school district for over 30 years, with 1 more year to go.
Thank you, Tom. We'll have more to say, and we have a closing as well.
Geez, that was quick.
It goes fast.
Yeah.
Julian?
I can't figure out how to lower this, so I'm going to do that. Hello, my name is Julian Barracliff. I'm 56 years old. I have 3 sons. I have a 13-year-old in middle school, Miles, and 5-year-old twins who will be coming into the elementary school in the fall. One of those twins has autism. Every time I tell somebody I'm running the school board, well, most of the time, they stare at me and say, why on earth would you do something like that? So with that in mind, first and simplest, I think that when you live in a small town, you're supposed to do something. So, period. And so the next question is, for me, is why education as opposed to something else? And that's personal. I grew up very working class in England and had my life transformed by an extremely good education. So I really care about this a lot. If I'm critical of anything about the school tonight, which I'm sure I might be at some point, please don't get me wrong. This is a really good school. It's a good town, it's a good school. The elementary school is good. The SAT scores have been climbing steadily. We're now 17th in New York State, that's great. The IB program has fully taken root and reached critical mass, and I think that's a marvelous thing too. And we have great programs in sports and in theatre. But we also have to bear in mind that we spend a relatively high amount per student, and there's always going to be room for improvement. I'd be happy to share thoughts about possible improvements tonight if I get the chance, and I'm sure hopefully during the questions that will come along. I believe my life experience makes me a very strong candidate for the board. Educationally, I have an honours degree in business administration and French from a top 10 university in Britain. Professionally, I spent 27 years in finance in London and then in New York, in senior positions at Bankers Trust, Merrill Lynch, and Bank of America, where I built and ran complex global trading operations, people all around the world. And everyone who ever worked with me will tell you that I'm a team player. Personally, I've been on the board of a not-for-profit school in Manhattan for 7 years, so I have some experience of that. It's a very different world, but it is a board. And I've also spoken to the Sag Harbor board a couple of times, and I think they know that I'm friendly, but by no means afraid to be blunt. So I'm asking for your vote. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. And with that, we will get to the
And
question.
if somebody can tell me how to adjust the
Yeah,
volume.
if you unscrew this, it should, if you unscrew it, it
Somebody
should,
is going to go with an automatic.
be able to be adjusted.
You strong with it?
He loosened it for you.
Thank you.
It's like a day at the office.
Okay, I'm going to get back to that budget question, and since Yorgos began with the opening statements, I'm actually going to start with Caleb. The number of students is now or will soon be declining, yet expenditures are increasing. With the rising cost of living, increased assessments for some homeowners, the loss of the state and local tax deduction, how do you think school districts balance the need to manage spending moving forward with educational priorities?
Can you repeat that?
Okay, the number of students is now or will soon begin declining, yet expenditures are increasing. With the rising cost of living, increased assessments for some homeowners, the loss of the state and local tax deduction, how do you think school districts balance the need to manage spending moving forward with educational priorities?
Yeah, I think it's a difficult question since I think 2008, there's been a decline of kids out here. And at the same time, we're trying to do the best job we can to give the best education to our children. So I think we've done some wonderful things. We've done things with shared services, and we've done things that are on both ends of the spectrum for children. I think it's critical that we try to have our plans clearly defined ahead of time, that everybody knows about them. So where are the reductions, that people know about them ahead of time and can understand why those reductions would be made in that area. I think that the problem for me always comes when you come to the game late and listening, whether you were participating or not, you get people angry because they don't know what's going on. And I don't think that the transparency is as good as it could be. Because if we engage the community early on, they're going to accept that we're in a time where we need to tighten our belts better and still offer the services that are important. But I don't think it gets communicated early enough, community involved early enough. And I think we can tap a lot of people in the community to help us during leaner times.
Thank you, Chris.
Yes. Yeah, I think most of us have gotten hit with a reassessment letter in the mail that came a week or two, and we're all holding our breath of what it's going to mean when we get our tax bill. So I think we're all feeling the pain there. There's a variety of things we can and have been doing to make sure we mitigate that and we walk that fine line. One is looking to other districts and working for shared services. And over the past 9 years that I've been on the board, we've increased that dramatically. We've also increased revenue streams, and Superintendent Graves touched on some of that, but we've been doing that for 8 or 9 years. Doing some smart things like when we brought busing in, instead of outsourcing it, that saved us money. Prioritizing money where it matters the most. So I was very vocal this budgeting season that when we were paring back from the maximum we could actually tax, and we lowered it, I said time and again, we don't touch what happens in the classroom. That is the most important thing that impacts the children the most. So that was a key priority for me, and I think the board has kept an eye on that along with the administration and staff. Zero-based budgeting is also important. You just don't roll over what you put in the budget last year, but you make sure that every dollar is budgeted and in a way that is going to matter, and you don't budget money that you don't need. So setting priorities is really key. Having a 3 to 5 year fiscal plan, which we've implemented during my tenure on the board, so that you can actually plan and anticipate and adjust versus get caught and get surprised. And then making sure that you are in touch and listen to the community. And this has been a very generous community over the years, but we have to understand that we have people who are on fixed incomes. who are challenged to stay here, and we have to respect that, and we will not continue to get their support unless we do. So I think just spending wisely and planning well is how you can balance that.
Thank you. Brian?
I think of vital importance is that nothing happens to the programming and education of kids, and then outside of that, we can look to cut costs. We can look to have shared services. We can look for alternate streams of revenue, whether that be through the transportation that the district is doing now, or offer other programs that would be a receiving school. We would be a receiving school from, say, for instance, Southampton or East Hampton, getting more students in and having that revenue come in as a way of balancing out or softening the burden on our taxpayers inside of the district. I think, again, as Chris had said, looking at the budgets, making sure we are budgeting exactly or a little more than what is needed, but not adding too much or adding a cushion or anything like that. And I think the year-to-year comparisons and the year-to-year costs are really important. And I think that's something going forward. If I'm lucky enough to serve on the board, we would ask on a more regular basis than just budgeting season. It would be a recommendation that I would have, that we see that on maybe a more routine basis, whether it be month to month or quarterly, so we can see how our budgeting is matching up against spending with an eye, because we're always planning a year and a half in advance. And I think also long-term planning is very important, that you're not just going from budget to budget, that you're looking 3, 5, and 10-year horizons in preparation, so that there's not one year or one time that a large burden is going on the taxpayers. And in downward declining economic years, we spend from reserves to soften that if that's necessary.
Thank you. Tom?
I was just reading in a paper that Wayne Scott School is going to be closing due to today, due to increased population, and they cannot handle the influx of people coming in. And number one, I'd like to follow the vision that our superintendent has really embraced over the last few years, is by attracting students from other districts, paying more tuition, bringing more to, I think we're making $1 million a year now, outside tuition. I think, Sag Harbor Elementary School being a blue ribbon candidate school year in and year out makes that attraction possible. Transportation is a big issue for me, because they say that, we outsource over $400,000 to Montauk Bus Company. I think it's more than that. I would take a look at doing budget cuts without compromising one thing from these kids, because they need our educational services. I will vote for the budget with an asterisk, that we get right to work and start looking at that and do some long-range planning around that. Finally, I think what really threw people over the top that I've been listening to, because I've been on a listening tour, I don't have an opinion tour. The assessments that were just recently released threw people over the top. Everybody's already stressed out as it is. Our youth can't seem to stay here. Our teachers are having a hard time just getting to school because they're so far out of district. So we have to work really hard together as a community. One community, one big team, and we have to do this together, because we can't do it by ourselves.
Thanks, Tom.
To the second.
Julian?
Well, the elephant in the room, obviously, is housing affordability, because that sort of drives all of these things. So, as I understand it, the school population peaked 6 years ago at 1,059, and it's gone down to 953 in 6 years, and that's inclusive, I believe, of pulling in approximately 53 kids from the other districts. That's in the number. So that's a striking statistic, there's no doubt about it. I'd like to commend two things. Having been new to all of this and having watched just recently the processes, the budgeting and so on, I'd like to really commend two things. It was a really good idea to build up a reserve. Okay? Great idea. So there's $13.5 million in various buckets and reserves. That's a very good thing, because we're going to need some of it at some point. I'm not sure how, when and where, but we will. Also the process, the budgeting process, from what I've seen of it so far, I was very impressed with the methodology and how they went about it. The downward trend in population is unlikely to turn around unless something else changes, right? The forces at play are driving it. So we do have to continue to look for the. I'm not going to repeat what Chris and Brian already said about shared services and everything else. It's a commendable effort. It's important that we continue to do it. I do think that there might be certain pieces of the puzzle out on the East End that are better suited to consolidation than others. I know some people have talked about the debate of consolidating districts. There's a saying about, a leopard can't change its spots, and a friend of mine once retorted to me, they can, but it's an extremely complicated and expensive operation. And I think consolidating districts is, but underneath that, pieces of it, I'm going to mention special needs, for example, could be quite prime for smaller and more detailed consolidation. We've got 6 different districts administering 6 different special needs programs to small numbers of kids in each district right now. I would like to think about whether we could consolidate them all, and if we were the consolidator or consolidatee, I don't know which the word is, I think we could probably get paid for it in the same way that we get paid for the 53 students who come in for a regular education.
Thank you, Julian. You'll have time to expound upon that shortly. Yorgos?
Okay. I mean, while I do believe we have to be fiscally responsible, I mean, we can have all the burden to the taxpayers. At the same time, we have to offer like a stellar program in the school. We can't cut back on programs if there's a downturn. We have to keep investing. I mean, if you saw it just in the presentation right now, the budget, we had an increased revenue from out-of-district students. They come here for a reason, because this is a really good school. This is the reason we moved here, because it was the best school out here out east. So I think it's important, like, while we keep the balance, that we don't increase the budget, a lot, or we don't have like a lot of at the expense of the tax burden. We have to keep like our programs, and we have to keep investing in here. And yes, there's the shared services, the out-of-district students, where we can come up with like a lot of other revenues.
Thank you.
All right, the next question is somewhat connected, and we'd just like to hear some more specifics. And Chris, we'll start with you. The Sag Harbor School District has enacted some shared services with neighboring districts through purchasing and also through transportation. What are some other shared services you believe the district should explore?
Well, first I want to actually add to your list, because we have shared services that go way beyond that. Those are some that are the most obvious, because they tend to be revenue or cost centers, so you see big numbers on a spreadsheet. But we actually have shared services that have to do with sports. So we have other districts, athletes coming and with us. We offer opportunity for athletes from this district to go elsewhere. We have students that come here for certain programming that don't exist in their school. The purchasing that we have, so there's a variety of shared services we have. There's been discussion, and we kind of do this litmus test as a board, that sometimes if something new is being created, a new position, let's say, you might say, is this something that would lend itself to be a shared service with the neighboring district? And I think continually asking that question and looking at our ongoing development in the district through that lens is important, because sometimes it's not just keep doing the way it's always been done. Sometimes maybe you want to try something new. So we continue to look, and it takes 2 to dance. So there are times we may tee something up, and another district may say, we don't need to do that with you. We have enough here. There are some districts around here that have a lot of resources and not a lot of students. So, but we continue to ask. I think that Superintendent Graves has done a terrific job with shared services in the district, and her predecessors did as well earlier in my tenure. But again, I think if there's additional programming that we want, potentially there's a staff member that could be shared between both. Maybe there are some ground services. We're already doing purchasing, but we're open to anything. So, and there is a consortium and an ongoing discussion between superintendents out east and business officials out east. And they meet regularly to have these conversations, and I think that's the most important thing, because when you understand each other's needs, then you can find connections and opportunities in order to have the shared services.
Thank you. Brian?
I think something that could be more utilized is shared services in programming. So sharing of teachers, sharing of classrooms. It's specifically, we're moving toward more of a technology-based culture, and maybe more technology classes, computer classes, and an effort that I think Sag Harbor's positioned to be able to be a school where we can offer those programs, and other schools would send their children here, which would then reduce our costs and also bring in additional revenue, which would help terms of budgeting and with the taxpayers. And I think the way to do that is for the superintendents and school faculty to, we need an overlay list, a list of, what does Southampton offer, what does Bridgehampton offer, what does East Hampton offer, what does Sag Harbor offer, and we lay it over. And when we have those overlapped areas, as Chris said, that's the area where you can target. Those are the easiest areas to save costs and to expand programming. I think that's what needs to be done first, so there's identified areas. And I think until that happens, it's hard to say what specific areas until we know those lists.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah, thank you, because it kind of ties into my introduction when I got cut off like a
It
third
all
way
works
through.
out.
So, there's a wide range of kids that go to our school. You get from, my son was a special ed student 18 years ago, and they have come a long way. Back then, it was very, they were all in one class, and over the years, we were learning and learning more and more about different needs for different kids, from autism and other learning disabilities. So you have that spectrum, then you have the IB program, and in the middle of that, you have students that are going to go to college, and you have some students that are not going to go to college. There's 5 kids in the last year that I know that came from Sag Harbor that have taken on either their father's businesses or developed their own, and they've actually had the opportunity to build their own homes in the Sag Harbor School District. And I'm really proud of them for that. And so I'd like to take a look at even possibly, we spend a lot of money spending very few kids up to a BOCES program. Do we have the space and do we have the qualifications to create a BOCES program for those kids that are looking for a trade so they could stay in this community? And also the shared sports programs. Yeah, that's it.
Thank you. Julian?
First of all, obviously the things that the guys have listed as possible areas of focus make complete sense. So I'd rather try and make, I guess, a broader point about when it comes to shared services, which is probably shared ideas. I think that in my very limited experience, when you ring up other schools and ask them how they do things and study how they do them, they're pretty receptive because it's not a competitive marketplace. It's not companies. It's public schools. And it might be quite interesting, I think, to figure out what the leading attributes of the most successful schools are. What's this? One great way of being inventive is to just copy what somebody else does well. But the trick is to figure out what the criteria are. So I think it might be very interesting to actually target, schools that are particularly successful in particular areas, and develop dialogue and relationships with them about what they do, with a view to fairly shamelessly copying the good bits. I think that's an interesting area. I'm really glad Tom brought up the BOCES thing, by the way, because I think it's also extremely important. We all talk about academics and everything else, but the trade stuff matters a lot. There are tons of kids out here who can and should go directly into trades. 2 days ago, I bumped randomly out by the water into a kid. I don't know how old he was, but he couldn't have been more than about 16, quite happily stripping down an outboard engine. And I actually got out of the car and said, "How on earth do you know how to do that?" And he told me he spends 2 hours a day, or however many hours a day is, at BOCES, and he had this skill already coming up. And I think it's great, to have those skills. I know that Southampton, I think, are making efforts to host BOCES in rather than transport people out. And I'd like to very much look into that. I think we should really try to ramp up whatever we can about the vocational skill side of things. And BOCES is one way of doing it, and local companies is the other way to do it alternatively. So that's another way of being, I guess, in both forms with other schools and with local companies. What I'm really saying is let's try to be very outward looking.
Thank you. Jorgis?
Yeah. I mean, when we're thinking about shared services, especially for the future, I think we have to look also in the future of education. So there's a lot of new areas we have to explore, whether it's robotics, artificial intelligence, animation, engineering. These are things that maybe we can share together with the other school districts and develop those programs so we have that opportunity for our students. Another opportunity might be expanding the current IB program. We have a great IB program, but I think there's a lot of other subjects in engineering or the arts we don't offer right now. And a lot of kids have to take them online, and maybe that's something we can develop together. And the last thing is something Tom and Julian already brought up, it's about the vocational training. You know, we don't offer it right now here in the district. Southampton's going to start it in September. Where they're going to offer the carpentry. It's something maybe we have to look into it.
Thank you. Caleb?
Well, we've heard a lot already about the identifying the shared services within schools, you know, whether it be, you need more players for the tennis team or more people for a robotics team. I think that we'll obviously keep pursuing that. I'd like to be a little bit more proactive and reach out to our community that aren't just schools, that can offer us something to help boost our education. We live in a vibrant community with accomplished writers, accomplished musicians. I would like to see us as a community tap them and bring them in, because these are people that could be professors at universities, and I would love to have them part of our community, be more involved in it. When we talk about the BOCES, you know, I would like to see a Habitat for Humanity by BOCES to help to housing for teachers. You know, so we can try to work with the town, find some suitable plots that we create apartments that our kids can work on and actually build apartments that could potentially be things for students to live in our area and not be bused in from an hour away. So I'd like to get the entire community involved, not just from a school point of view, but from people who have a valuable asset they can lend us.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to ask a related question that was submitted from the audience, and we're starting with Brian this time. Are you open to merging school districts and saving in administrators? What can the BOE do to make that happen?
I think you need a lot more information to do that. My parents were both administrators. My dad was a principal in 30 years for Gulfport, and he said one thing that never happens is the merger of school districts because of the local level referendum required between the districts and then at the state level for that to happen. So I think while it's a great idea in theory, in application, in terms of the community's identity, I don't know if it ever gets there, but I think it would be foolish to say I'm not open to it. I think if the right information was presented and we could look into that, we'd be open to it and see if it works. But from where I sit and what I know, I don't see that happening. I think the idea of it and the underlying shared services and cost savings is something that can be pursued, but an actual merger of the district, I think, is unlikely.
Thank you. Tom?
That's would take quite a lot of work and a few years to really even come to any kind of conclusion. Bridgehampton has already made it clear. By the way, they have more money than we do, and they have made it very clear what they're doing. East Hampton, big school. Southampton will never come here. The smaller schools, like Brian was saying, the shared services, I think we should strengthen that. The only merger I would see, and I will fight to my dying breath, is if there was ever a merger, we should close down Pierson High School and move up to the East Hampton town side goes to East Hampton, the Southampton side goes to Southampton. I would never see that happen. This is my community, this is our community. But that's the only realistic approach. And that's an approach I would never want to face, ever. So I would just like to continue with that before, I don't know the laws about special ed, but, we can have, along with the BOCES, if we're qualified and we can have a BOCES area in this school district, why not promote it for the other schools to come here? Also, special education. What are the parameters around that? I'd like to explore that. It's really, following the vision of what the superintendent really intended for the school, is to bring and promote more activity to our district. So I don't know the answers to that, but I'm committed to finding them. So, thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Julian?
So consolidation makes tons of sense on paper, but we are where we are, right? So whoever wrote the federal and state requirements for this, as I don't understand them in detail, but from what I've heard so far, you need multiple referenda in multiple locations, all matched up within time wind. Basically, it's like trying to land a plane in a really strong side wind, blindfolded, and hoping it all goes all right. So I wish we could do it in many senses, but there's not a lot of point in spending huge amounts of time and effort, climbing that particular slope, because it's as good as impossible the way it's currently written. If they rewrite the rule book, it would be great to revisit it, but we didn't write that. As I understand it, it's structured in a way that makes it close to impossible. I've already made the point, I don't want to be repetitive, but I think there are subsections that are right for consolidation, and that would be interesting to look at. But in terms of consolidating schools themselves, good luck with that. I also wanted to pick up, if I've still got time, I really like what Caleb said about bringing in. There's so much human capital in this town, so many interesting people doing interesting things, and bringing them in to stand in front of people of all different age groups and talk about what they do, lights all kinds of mini fires, in really interesting ways. And it's kind of amazing if you just, I've been doing a bit of standing around in Sagtown, talking to people for obvious reasons. And, the things that people turn out to do, you'd be amazed. You'd never expect it. And I think it would be really great to have a systematic program of having people come in here, local people come in and talk about what they do. And from, the most elemental physical trade type stuff and how you actually get things done, right up to, I met a guy in Sagtown the other day, turned out that, he lives here, he's the head sociologist of Facebook. Does anybody know who this is? That's a really interesting, very current discussion right there. So you never know what you're going to find out from people, and it would be good to get more of them in to talk. Thank you.
Thank you, Julian. Yorgos?
I could see the savings from doing something like this, but at the same time, every school has its own identity and culture. And by merging schools, you could be losing that identity and culture, and it reflects in the community too. Again, I think we can go back maybe into some services that we can look into it, but merging school districts, I don't think it's the right approach.
Thank you, Caleb.
I think first, I still think that we are sort of the leader of schools out here. So I wouldn't want to sort of diffuse that. I could have other people come in and share some of our resources and be more part of this, but merging in a district, when I was on the transportation committee, we would spend months trying to find 2 minutes to move a bus one way or the other way. I think if we had that in months, the obstacles of trying to merge school districts would be just insurmountable.
Thanks. Chris?
This question has been in the community as long as I've been in the community, I think. This kind of comes up, and it's one of those issues that you have very strong feelings on both sides. About 6-7 years ago, I went to a forum that was held in the evening in Southampton about mergers, because as a board member, I was really curious about what the opportunity and challenges might be. And there in the panel, we had the person from BOCES in New York State, who's kind of the lead in school district mergers, and Fred Theo, and a superintendent who attempted to have a merger in their district. And it was fascinating to hear what the intricacies are of trying to get a merger done in New York State. First of all, the state tells you that they're trying to encourage you to do a merger, then they offer no structure to get it done and no financial incentive. So 70% of the districts in New York State that actually get as far as to have a referendum for the public to vote on, 70% of the time after they've done all that work and spent tons of money and brain wrestled it and gotten in an argument with their neighbor, they fail. And they fail mostly because you have to have both districts approve it, and yet, generally speaking, when you do a merger from a taxpayer perspective, one district saves money and one district is full of citizens where it's going to cost them more. Never mind the other intricacies of it. And so kind of the conclusion of that forum was, until the state puts in some framework in which districts don't get hurt financially by trying to even try to do a merger, it's nearly impossible to happen. I can tell you over the 9 years I've been on the school board, it's been raised by Sag Harbor several times about, hey, is this an opportunity? But it's the kind of thing where unless there is a framework in which both parties can benefit financially, it's very hard to get taxpayers to agree to that. That being said, I think at least the more realistic, we've already addressed this, the more realistic opportunities are in shared services for now. And we've done a phenomenal job over the past 9 years of increasing that opportunity.
Thanks, Chris. Brian?
Oh,
Sorry.
Tom, we'll start with you on this question. What is your position on later start times?
Oh, good one. No, it really, the later start times, I'll start out with, it's costing us minimally $400,000 a year to outsource Montauk Bus Company. Majority of that number comes from sporting events. Now, last night the transportation committee, which has been doing phenomenal work, they're doing hard work, and there's some decisions to be made. One thing they didn't talk about with the students. The students are feeling the stress of, the student athletes are feeling the stress, especially, are feeling the stress of leaving class early, missing academic support early in order to get onto the bus, and then they have to run to their locker rooms, get on the bus, and they're just stressed out trying to make it to the bus. And the turnaround times are creating a lot more stress on the bus drivers. I spoke with 2 bus drivers, it's killing us. So I would ask the community to really reconsider going back to earlier start times, because the earlier start times is 10-15 minutes, which could be major in some ways, but when you're talking about money and budget, we all have to sacrifice a little bit, and it also hurts your teachers. I was talking to a teacher yesterday that the later start times are hurting them in getting to school. They're stuck in traffic longer and longer. So with all that being said, there's a budgetary concern, there's a human concern too. One board member last night had some evidence of more teen drug use, suicide problems, and I'd like to, he was the only one who mentioned it, and I don't disagree with him, but I'd like to see more research, because I think there's equally as much stress on our students who are stressing to get to those buses and leaving classes early, which should not be happening.
Thank you. Julian?
So I think the trade-off on this one, clearly popular subject, right? So I think the trade-off on this one is that, look, in terms of the actual research on this, the scientific research on this, the later start. I have a 13-year-old son, right? And a year ago, he was still leaping out of bed at the crack of dawn like Christopher Robin, which was infuriating in its own way. And now he's like a zombie because the hormones have arrived, right? So there's clearly, physiologically, once you get to a certain age, later starts, work a lot better for you. And the research that Tom was referring to is extensive and does indicate that all kinds of outcomes for teenagers improve with later starts. That's the good news. The bad news is that then it creates all these logistical complications, right? And that's the trade-off. I think, stop me if I'm wrong, but I think that the crux of the logistical problem is that if all the school districts around here had adopted the same policy, if we'd been in sync with each other, then a lot of that would go away. It's not the fact that we start late, it's the fact that we start late and some of our neighbours don't. So the reverse engineering on this is actually to try and persuade everybody else of the value of the logic of starting late, so that we're all making sync, so that people aren't leaving at different times to go to different places. But you see how those two things dovetail. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Can I rebut that a little bit?
Yes?
It does play a role in our athletics, and we're building a lot of sports programs. What time are these kids going to get home from a sporting event? The county and the state sets the rules for when, if there's a track meet or a basketball game at 4 o'clock, it starts at 4 o'clock. So, unless we negotiate with the state, which is non-negotiable because all the people that run the Board of Education for New York State are political appointees, we're never going to get there. So you're going to have these kids coming home in the dark. That's just my rebuttal to that.
Okay, thanks. Yorgis?
I think when that decision was made, they were looking at overall the benefit for the students across the whole school. I mean, Julian mentioned there's a lot of studies. They say that there's a benefit, minimizes stress and everything else for the students. It does. It has some implications, and we see it now with the whole transportation issue, that we have to add some routes and all this stuff, and there was an increased cost around it. And the transportation committee was looking at several different options, what we can do to like minimize that cost. I personally, as a parent, I think it was a good move. I think starting later, I see the benefits, because I have my son, like, you know, at an earlier start date, and now, like, you know, it's a later. So for me, I see the positive effects.
Okay, thank you. Caleb?
When I was on the transportation committee, we spent a lot of time analyzing the different options, and it always seemed to come down to the sports programs. And you know, I'm a firm believer in a liberal arts education where, you know, you do your studies, you do something in the arts, you do a sport. But I was a little concerned with how much we were dictating everything around the sport. I know it's a difficult thing because we have all sorts of different schools. I found the simplest solution was to send my kid to bed 10 minutes earlier, because my wife, she travels an hour and 10 minutes to work. She goes to bed somewhat early so she can get up at 5:30 and go to work. I think that the argument over 10 minutes, it doesn't, I haven't read the studies, but it doesn't seem worth it. If you were talking about a much bigger shift, then I may be more concerned about it. But I just don't think 10 minutes either way. There was one of the proposals yesterday that said if we, for the transportation, if we moved up the start time 10 minutes, we could save $130-something thousand. I thought, well, that's a no-brainer. That's the simplest one. Move 10 minutes up, and you know, you could save some money. Otherwise, you know, I'm for keeping it, you know, pretty much where it's at.
Thank you. Chris?
I spent a bit of time looking at the studies. I'm not a scientist, but the articles are pretty interesting on this, and the research does show that when children become adolescents, there's a getting clock changes, and they literally, a large percentage can't just go to sleep 10 minutes early or 30 minutes early. You can set them up there, but their body doesn't allow them to. It actually shifts. So in a perfect world, if we weren't dependent on the rest of all the dynamics that we face, it makes sense. And there are other parts of the country where they've done this. The whole cities have moved later. Unfortunately, it's not so easy for us. And what happened was it was implemented, and I think it was a good idea, not necessarily implemented in the right way, because, and so, you know, I thought it needed to be vetted more personally. I said that, I'm on record publicly, because what ended up happening was, even if it's an 11-minute shift, we have a much higher percentage of kids who are missing out on that academic support. And you don't really see that until your child is in high school for the most part, and they're taking those IB courses, and all of a sudden, you know, they're not able to stay, or their teacher is a coach and has to leave early, and now there's no access to the support that they really need. There was additional costs, 6-figure cost of busing that was never reviewed or known up front. You know, as a board member, I found out in March. And also we have staff that are already commuting far. We've hired some great staff members, but you know, a new teacher is not going to be able to buy a house in Sag Harbor, and they've got this long commute. And now we've shifted it so that it's just a little worse for them. So now they're really hitting that parade going home. So I think while it's a really important idea, I think that we have to rethink about how we're implementing it. I'd love to see us continue, but I also think that, you know, I would welcome the leadership to say, hey, we need to talk to our surrounding districts to see what we can do. But also, just so you know, our kids are in leagues where they're playing schools that are 90 minutes away and an hour away. We're talking about big schools in the western Suffolk County, so it's not so easy. So I would just say it's a smart idea, but there's some pain points we haven't worked out yet.
Thank you. Brian?
I would have a point of clarification. Is it the later from the current start time is your question, or keeping the existing start time? You just said later start times. There's not anything on the table to change the start time that I'm aware of.
The philosophy of later start times.
So later than it currently is.
and how it's currently implemented in the school district.
mean, well, I need more research to answer that question. I mean, I think the start time is the start time now. There's not any proposal to change the start time as of now, so until that was discussed and vetted, I wouldn't take a position on it because there's a lot of logistics that come into that. So transportation, cost, commuting, I think we're not equipped to answer that question now unless we know what the intangibles are associated with that and what the thought is. As of now, the start time is the start time, and I would leave it at that until further discussion can be had.
Okay, Julian, I'm going to start with you for the next question. Obviously, the opioid crisis has hit very close to home. Suffolk County is home to the highest number of related deaths in New York State, and recent surveys have shown that Sag Harbor School District students have, at a higher average than the state average, engaged in risky behavior when it comes to alcohol use and drug use. What do you think the School Board of Education and the administration should be doing to address these issues?
Well, obviously, it's not just opioids. It's the whole cocktail, isn't it? And it's really worrying. It worries me because I have, as I keep saying, a 13-year-old who's now sort of floating into that world where those types of issues start to concern you more and more. I think that you've got to try really hard to get ahead of it, and I certainly personally I have drilled, even at the age of 13, into my son the unbelievable amount of harm that not just opioids but all kinds of other things can do. Because, for example, they'll say, but everybody smokes a bit of weed, or they'll rationalize something that way. The THC content in hydroponic marijuana is 13 times more concentrated than it was 25 years ago. So it's rocket fuel. And if you consume it regularly, particularly during a period of your life where your neuroplasticity is still active, when you're adolescent, you have neuroplasticity. Your brain is still forming; it's not set yet. If you start pumping THC, the psychoactive chemical, into your brain during those years, the probability that you end up with mental health problems skyrockets. It doesn't go up; it absolutely skyrockets. So these kinds of things, scary things, I think should be put very bluntly and quite early to kids, and the message should be repeatedly beamed at them. I think that's very, very, very important.
Thank you. Yorgos?
It's a big problem, and it's across pretty much all the Long Island communities and pretty much the whole country. We see it happening more and more. I mean, in our days when we were kids, it wasn't as bad as it's now, and we only see it getting worse. I mean, from a school point of view, what can we do to prevent this? A lot of the influence is coming from the outside, as from the inside. We have to pay more attention on this. We have to develop certain programs, whether it's like having kids spend more time on athletics or like arts or something else that, it's going to keep them busy and they're not going to have like too much free time to be diverted from what they're supposed to be doing. But it's definitely a big problem, and we have to look into it further and see what can we develop more.
Thank you, Caleb.
I was actually shocked when I heard how much opiate use was in Sag Harbor. I thought I lived in this little idyllic town, and having a third or fourth grader, it wasn't something that really I was aware of. But as you read more, everything, it was a serious concern to me. Even like, I said, would I stay here as I got older, with my kids? I went to a high school in Los Angeles that had drugs all over the place. But I think it comes down to educating, the families, constant campaigns about the harm, the constant awareness. It's part of also, as a kid, you're taught to keep your kids so busy, get your kids into everything, and that's a way to keep them out of it, out of bad things. I think we try to do that. I think almost every one of our kids are doing 2 or 3 things a week at minimum. But having those conversations with them, having very strict policies within the school is our best chance to fight it.
Thank you, Chris.
I was at a school board conference last week where an educator from New York City shared that the top 2 schools for high schools for drug use in New York City are the top 2 academic high schools, public high schools in New York City. So it used to be, when I was in high school in the 70s, it was the disenfranchised kids were the drug users. Now it seems to be that it's across the board. And we face this more than a lot of other school districts to a greater degree because we live in a resort community. Think about it. We get a huge influx of people who come in the summer to have a good time. And when you go down our main street, we have more bars per square foot than the average village does. So the environment alone creates a challenge for us. So, I think the school district has done a good job, but there's a lot more that can be done, obviously. Early conversations with students, intervention services, educating parents. Several years ago, we worked with some community members to found the Community Coalition, which is now safe in Sag Harbor. Research shows that it actually takes an entire community behind this effort for it to be successful. So there are kind of 12 parts of the community that need to be engaged. So, and then, by the way, the students were just involved with Safe in Sag Harbor on a great PSA. If you haven't seen it, see it. You should be proud of them for doing that. And working with others in other school districts and seeing what's working for them. But we've got to talk, and we've got to provide help and support too. When we have children who are facing this, we need to make sure that as a school district we can have them access resources. We can't assume they're going to get resources from outside. And I think on the East End, we're resource light in many areas, including this. And then lastly, I would add that as we continue to make the academic programs more rigorous, and as the digital world has taken over our kids' lives, I think the level of stress they feel is so much higher. Now they see the best of everybody's life and wonder why that's not their life every moment. They see the party they weren't invited to, the sleepover that they were ignored. And so I think that we just need to continue to provide them with mechanisms to relieve that stress that are healthy for them and teach them how to manage stress more effectively.
Thank you. Brian?
I think we have to listen better. I think it goes back and start earlier, and I think it all correlates and it all starts with mental and physical wellness. I think whether it be through mental health, availability of services, counseling, screenings, I think that's where we have to start. We have to start before it becomes a greater issue. For instance, when parents that have kids that are in school, you hand in a physical sheet every year, and you go to the doctor, they check on a physical, can you play sports? But are they screening for overall wellness, mental health, or otherwise? I think that's where it needs to start so that it doesn't lead to a problem. And we need to start that at our younger kids and provide more services all the way up through that. And have resources available for interventions when it becomes necessary, and have a safe place or have an area or a person at the school or otherwise that kids are comfortable talking to, so that we're aware of these before they become issues. So I think it all relates back to mental health and overall wellness, and that's where I think resources and personnel should be directed.
Thank you. Tom?
Yeah. This one hits hard. I'm good. I never had a drug problem. I did inhale though. A lot of people here know my history. I've been sober for 32 years. Drugs hit my family hard. It happens to the most innocent of people. Just in the normal world, surgeries. We had a member of our family had surgery, and somebody said, "Here, try this Oxycontin." So my wife and I went to bed for the last 10 years, wondering when the cops were going to knock on our door. So, I'm not an expert, I'm a witness. And I've learned a lot. Brain development, not even just opioids, caffeine, Red Bull, all this kind of stuff that these kids are into. You know, nutrition is so important. My son is one of the best runners on the East End. It's all about nutrition. Can stunt your brain growth, because the brain doesn't start to mature until you're 23 to 24 years old. So, but the good news is it can come back. I don't care about the, I really don't care about
I'll give him one of my
I
minutes.
don't care, I don't care about the And we've learned so much. I was a single dad, and I know for my sons, and my wife came along, we have 2 children, Ben, you see him walk around all around the community, and my daughter's second year in one of the most prestigious art schools, and she's maintained herself onto the dean's list. She does a lot of her art through what her experiences have been as a family. So it starts at home. I've seen the pain, I've felt the pain. I myself have tried to help, and I've helped a lot of people, and I've tried to help hundreds of people. And boy, oh boy, it's all about the education, and it starts with the frickin' bullying on social media. It starts with peer pressure. Just having a few beers at a party turns into smoking a few joints. The vaping that goes on in this school is phenomenally blatant. And we need to educate ourselves. We need to have experts come in here. Not just to give a talk on science. We need to have people who have been through this as a family and talk to these kids. You know, having 2 generations of kids, I have one heck of a reputation with these kids. I'm like the cool dad, but the dad's gonna ask the tough questions. And I'd love to see people with more real life experiences talking to these students about the ramifications and the decisions that they make. Because some kids don't have parents. There's single parents out there, and it's very difficult. There's a lot of pain involved in that. I'm only speaking from my opinion and my experience. I'm not an expert, but been there, done that. And it's a day at a time. And these kids need to know. I always tell my kids, and I preach to other kids that come to my house all the time, the decisions, I grew up here, so I know. The decisions that you make now are going to define your legacy from where you went to school from in Sag Harbor. Because once you get labeled and stereotyped in this village, you're done. That's it. That's who you are for the rest of your life. And there's some people that still feel that way. There's people that think I still drink. I said, geez, I'm almost ready to now, but no. It's a crisis. It's a national, international crisis. And it starts from the top. It starts from the top. It's got to go from the DEA, which has, their powers have been restricted federally.
Okay, Tom.
Thank you. Down to the local level.
Julian, go ahead.
Yeah, a couple of things on that.
Thank you.
Talk to you, welcome. I'd just like to add that if there's a lot needs to be done, and if we need to figure out how to pay for it, we could start with the $13.9 billion that the Sackler family have made. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question, yours, will start with you. The Sag Harbor Learning Center in the former Stella Maris building is under construction. What are your hopes or your concerns about that project?
It will be completed by the fall. It was a decision, I know it's a very controversial subject, and it was a decision that was made by the community. It wasn't unanimous, but the majority said they wanted that building to be part of the school, the Sag Harbor School District. There were certain timelines, there was a budget, but we need to make sure that those are going to be met. Because when people voted for it, there were certain milestones that they were voted upon. And I think it's critical that we make sure that we meet those. I think there needs to be a little more transparency around it. There's a lot of information floating around, but there's a lot of confusion. Overall, I think it was something good. We needed to expand the facilities of the school, but at the same time, it's coming at a high cost, and that's something we have to figure out, that we keep it under the budget.
Thank you. Caleb?
This is one of those things that I don't think I had enough information when it started. And from being on the outside, it's hard to make, an honest assessment of where I have certain things that I feel about it that I think are great. I've been in the building business out here for a long time. I'm worried of the overages. I'm worried about the changing certain things to get other things. I think it would be a great asset to the community. I might have looked at it and done it and suggested different avenues to use it in different ways. But those are all things that I wasn't involved in. It's part of the reasons I wanted to run for the board, to be more involved in decisions so I felt better about what they are, and inform the community so they felt better about what it is. I think the disjoint, to me, creates the uneasiness about it. And I know there's certain things that we need to fix, and there are things that we would like. So there's the wish list, and then the things that you must do. And I'm hoping it's a good starting point to get the wish list done, and that it will turn out to be something, most useful for us.
Thank you. Chris?
So, as I think you're all aware, the community made the decision that they wanted the district to acquire the buildings and turn it into an additional educational facility. My hope for it, I have a few hopes for it. One is that when we are implementing our pre-K there and offer a half-a-day daycare, we think that there's going to be more children that take advantage of that because it'll be a full-day program. And we know that the earlier the children are engaged in those programs, the more successful they are on their path. Whether it's a reduction of intervention services you need, or just an easier transition going into kindergarten. There's a whole variety of benefits to that. Secondly, there'll be a space there. We are space constrained with our current building, so we'll have more space, and we're hoping that there's additional programming there. And it will also hopefully afford us to have a more standalone middle school, which there's been discussion about for a long time, so hopefully that comes to fruition. I have concerns about it, and that is, over budget. Is it going to be open on time? Is it really going to be where we want to invest our money? It's an additional thing to manage. It requires more with the same administrative team. So, and we'll have to see. We haven't opened it yet. We're hoping to open it in August. I think that's the plan. I would say to the community, hold the board and the district accountable, though. I do think we could be more transparent with our timeline and our budgets. We haven't done a real formal presentation since January. So, I suggest you demand that of us. This is your facility. This is your new school, and as we open it, we consider to think about other ways we can use it. Please participate in that as well. But I'm hopeful that it will be a good investment of time and resources.
Thank you. Brian?
The public voted on it, they approved it. If that vote happened today, would it be different? I think it might be, but it happened, it's moving forward, and I think what we can do is work to try to come in somewhere close to budget, and then try to make this as an opportunity to bring in revenue. I mean, part of what I do is I'm involved in building. I know building never comes in on time or on budget, and I don't expect anything different here, but I think we should work to make that a resource for the district to bring in revenue, generate revenue, and go back to alleviate the burden on the taxpayers inside of this district. And I think it's something that other districts don't have. It's additional space that we didn't have. And I think used properly, it would be a great benefit to us. We have it and we're moving forward. So we need to work with those tools and in that direction at this time.
Thank you. Tom?
I can't think of anything else to add that Brian just stated.
Okay. Julia?
So picking up on two things, as Brian quite correctly said, there's been a lot of storm and drang around this whole project, but we are where we are, and the important thing now is to make the best use of it. Chris mentioned early intervention. There's a slightly boring but technical point that I want to really make sure you understand about early intervention, which is that you don't pay for it. And a lot of people, I think, don't understand that. So, special needs kids, when they live under the world of early intervention, that is a federal and county purse. It does not come out of your taxes. And some of the confusion of that comes because there are times at certain ages where the school becomes the sort of administrator of those services. They're organizing it, they're running what's happening. It's not coming out of the school budget. I just want you all to make sure you understand that clearly. So on that basis, I think it would be great to see at least part of Stella Maris be some kind of early intervention special needs hub. I've already mentioned that I think having a hub model out here where we bring kids in from the other nearby towns and get paid for it in the same way that we do with the 53 typical kids who come in from other districts would be A, financially good for us, B, a really good use of the resource that we now have on our books and are looking to find a good answer to.
Thank you.
Okay, so we only have time for a couple more questions, even though there's a lot more we'd like to ask. Obviously, the school district will be looking at hiring a new superintendent. What are the qualifications that you believe the new superintendent should have, and how do you think that process should unfold? Caleb, we're starting with you.
Well, I want to start by thanking Katie Graves for what she's done for us so far. I think we're on a good path. I'll be sorry not to work with her if I get chosen to be on the board. But I don't really know. I don't really know the process. I know there are headhunters and they've chosen one already. I would also like to see what were the choices of headhunters, because I'm not familiar with that. I'd like to make sure that whoever's interviewed is somebody that is vetted and shown to everybody, not just the board. Obviously, I want them to share the same passion that we all have for our school, which of course they will. But will they know? Will they be experienced in our level of school, our community of school? Where we are, what the expectations that we do, and how well that we work together. So it's like in the interviewing process to know that we're all on the same page and we have the same goal to provide the best education we can for all our kids.
Thank you, Chris.
In terms of what I think we should look for, I think the priority is somebody who is an exceptional educational CEO. So from my perspective, that starts in the classroom. I always think it's important to have a superintendent who spent many years teaching and hopefully going through the ranks, because we are in the business of children and teaching children. And if your top leader doesn't know what that means, what the challenges and opportunities are and resources necessary, I think that there's a missing link involved. You want somebody who is a great communicator, who connects with the community, because this is a community who's very involved, and that's really important. Someone who's fiscally responsible so we can continue to have the resources to fund these great programs. Someone who's an effective communicator, but ultimately someone who's very educationally centric. In terms of the process, I think I'm the only board member who's gone through the superintendent search before, so I have experience with this. And I do believe that community engagement is really important, and that is the intention of how we're going to move forward with this search, that we want feedback from the community about what you are looking for in a superintendent, what's important to you. But I can't tell you what the whole process is because I'm one of 7 board members and we haven't had the kickoff meeting with the firm yet. I can share with you they're the #1 firm in the tri-state area for placing superintendents in public school districts. It was founded by ex-educators who have been superintendents of districts and teachers and have been embedded in public school districts. And they have been successful in working with this district for the last 3 searches. So they have experience kind of understanding our DNA, which is great because it should allow us to kind of shortcut the process of getting to know us a bit as a community and being able to reach out to you as a community and getting your input. So, and I hope that when we do that, that you're all involved and engaged, because the more voices and more feedback we get, the more effective the search is going to be. And thank you, Katie, for your, it will be 6 years.
Thanks, Chris. Brian?
I think you need to find a leader, and I think that leader needs to be someone who's, as Chris said, started from the ground up, who was a teacher, became an administrator, and then became a superintendent. And through that, I think, just a personal practice of mine that I think the board should look to is you look from within first, and then you move out. We're in a small school in a small area. If we have someone qualified in, I would say that's the best way to do it. We want to hire from within if possible, and if not, we'll be moving forward with a search firm to find the best qualified candidate. And I think public input's a really important part of that. And I implore everyone here and to tell everyone that when that schedule is set for public input to see what the community wants in a superintendent, that everyone takes part in that.
Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, I've been learning a lot about this process. If I'm not, I think I'm correct, Chris, in stating it's costing us $18,000 to make that search with this outfit, right?
Just a little more than 19,000.
Yeah, $19,000. From what I do understand, what I've been told is the list of candidates that they do search for, they recycle them a lot, so it's a very difficult process. And you can read a resume all you want, but our community really needs to get involved in that. I'd like to see teachers get involved, especially. They're the ones who are in the trenches with the kids, and the administration. In the perfect world, I'd love to see one from within. There are qualified, and you do have to be qualified. You can't just be a teacher and be up for superintendent. You have to, there's certain qualifications. We do have a couple of people like that. And this guy's going to hate me, but there's one that I think is very qualified, but he's going to have to go through the same exact vetting process as everybody else and be investigated also. He goes by the initials of Matt Malone. Joe Frisicano built a wonderful school, and Matt's been in the school district for 22 years. First as a teacher, vice principal, and took over as principal. He has carried on. When Frisicano retired, he didn't change the whole thing. He kept it flowing, and he's keeping it to a high quality level. That's the kind of characteristics that somebody I would love to see. But then again, he has to go through the same exact process as everybody else. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Julia?
So the first thing is when you're the CEO of a company, I mean, it's a complicated and painful job in all sorts of ways, I'm sure, but the one thing that you can be sure of is that your shareholders all want the same thing, which is for you to make them money, period. I think when you're the CEO of a school, you have the additional complication that not only do you have a complicated set of tasks, but your shareholders almost certainly want different things. So it's an incredibly difficult job. So well done. I think it's an incredibly difficult job. These guys encapsulated the qualities already. There's no point in me, repeating the list. It's, teaching experience, nothing like it. Communication, fiscal responsibility, and so on. I'm going to throw one more in there. There's a sort of continuum on this, right? I'm going to use the New York mayor as an example, where there used to be New York mayors that were, quite sort of politicized and presidential figures. And then this guy came along. He was able to come along because he was worth $30 billion, but Michael Bloomberg came along and sort of turned the model around the other way and said, I just want to be a COO of your town, of your very large, complicated town. I just want to make it work. I want to make the mousetrap work better. So I want to sit down and figure out how to get the trash delivered, and just the subways. And he did a lot of work just nitpicking his way through all kinds of processes. And I'm not recommending one or the other, or any individuals either, but the other thing to think about is, to what extent you want leadership and communication and so on, which is important, but also to what extent do you want someone who can make this very big and very complicated mousetrap function better. I mean, there was a presentation last night just about the buses and the level of complexity, right? When you go, it's just unbelievable how apparently simple things, when you get into the nitty-gritty, turn out to be extraordinarily complicated, and particularly when you start, moving a lever over here, and then way over here there's some other unintended consequence. The school's full of all this kind of stuff. So I would add in terms of qualities, executive skill, which is lots of nitpicking, lots of follow-up, keeping lists, being really anal about everything, doing the Bloomberg version. So I tossed that out there as well.
Thanks, Julian. Yorgos?
Yeah. I mean, I think we have to look for someone that will bring continuity to what we have achieved up to now, but at the same time, we need someone who's going to be visionary, who's going to be looking at best practices, who's going to be looking at what's the next big thing in education. I think these are qualities we have to look when the board interviews a new candidate. Of course, they have to have strong business skills because this is an organization. It has to be fiscally responsible. He has to be a good educator that understands all the educational needs of the district. And at the same time, he has to be aware that Sag Harbor has its own culture as a school. And he has to be able, or she has to be able to fit in within the culture.
Okay, thank you. So we're actually going to ask one last question, even though we know it is running a little late, and then we'll be doing closings. And we're going to try and limit you guys to just 1 minute, again, just with our minds on the clock. But this was an audience-submitted question, and one of the only ones that applied to everybody, so we definitely wanted to get it in.
Superintendent Graves has pointed out that the facilities in the high school gym and locker room areas are in need of renovation. She has stated that she would like the district to accomplish these renovations in a 2020 bond project. If you were elected to the BOE, would you support the 2020 bond? And we can start with Chris.
Yeah. Just to add to, I think the question is missing a piece, so I'm just going to add to clarify, because I could see Katie going, wait a minute, I could just see it. She clarified last night that we have some service debt that is coming off, which means that if money was applied to do this, it would not change kind of what we would need to have the taxpayers pay. So it's hard for me to know whether we should do it or not because I haven't seen costs, we haven't vetted it out at all. I mean, we have, for good or bad, an old building. It's charming, but it's an old building, and we need to take care of it because, as you know, just like a cavity, if you ignore it, the problem gets worse, and then it gets more painful, and it costs you more. So, and I'm hopeful that the Sag Harbor Learning Center isn't going to distract us. It won't, because we won't let it, but from maintaining the plant here. And so we do, if we've been down to the lockers, they're in sorry shape. If you've looked at the ceiling in the gym, it's in sorry shape. So we're going to need to do it in the next several years and possibly next year if all the numbers work out.
Brian?
Sure, I'm going to give you the same answer how I answered that last night when we were asked that until we have more information, I can't take a position. We don't know what it's going to cost. We don't know what the scope is. So I'm open to hearing what all those things are. But until we know that, you can't take a position on it or commit to it. So that's what I said last night, and I'll say to everyone this evening.
Tom?
Yeah, I wish it was that simple. Katie Graves also pointed out last night, over the weekend, there was a lot of concern about the condition of the basketball courts. And she got right on it, took care of it, and hopefully we'll have even a better future rebuilding the basketball courts. I wish it was that easier with the bond for the shape that the locker rooms are in. And I didn't get a chance before, so I have less than 30 seconds, and I just want to really commend Katie Graves, your 70-hour part-time job, just phenomenal. I'm going to hold you accountable to seeing your vision through. I'm going to hold you accountable to what you want for our community. And last night you said you were leaving with a heavy heart. You're not going to leave here with a heavy heart. You're going to leave here with a full heart and your vision fulfilled and somebody to take your place to carry it on. So thank you.
Thanks, Tom. Julian?
Echoing everybody else, I can't possibly comment not knowing the price, so I won't. So I'm just going to shamelessly use the 53 seconds that I've got for a plug. So just to say that if people do want to spend some time in the future talk about bond issues and so on and so forth. I did spend quite a lot of years being a managing director of an interest rate derivatives trading business, so I think that's useful. Just throwing that out.
Thank you. Yorgos?
I mean, there was an issue yesterday when they were discussing during the board meeting about the basketball courts that are not up to shape. There's a lot of like improvements need to be made. I agree we have to keep up with our facilities. We have to look what's the cost around it and exactly whether that makes sense or not.
Thank you. Caleb?
Obviously, I'd love to have this open up and brand spanking new and everything perfect. I was a little concerned on how it was presented because it was presented in a two-part, that we have to have the doors and certain safety measures taken care of. Oh, and we also should do the floors and the ceiling. So I didn't feel that it was as clear to me as what needed to be done. I thought at one point that part was okay. It's understanding that we need to upgrade for security. And so without really knowing what the costs are, you know, I'm hesitant to make a rendering of what you should do until I actually got more details.
Okay, thank you. We'd like to offer each candidate 2 minutes for closing remarks, and we'll start with you, Brian.
Sure. I want to thank everyone tonight for whoever expressed the news, for putting this on, the PTSA, for everyone coming out tonight. I hope it was somewhat informative. You guys have a hard decision. What I heard up here tonight, everyone, first for putting themselves out there and trying to be part of this and, you know, exposing themselves to their personal interests, to the community and requesting your vote. I think the community is going to be lucky to have any of the three up here. So I want to thank everyone up here for tonight. I think it's great and for putting the first foot forward, whether it be on the school board or something otherwise. And I want to ask you for your vote. I enjoyed my last few months serving on the board, and I want to continue that and continue the school moving forward. I'm always available. I think that's one of the things that benefits me on this board. Bring knowledge. I know what I know, and I know what I don't know, and how to ask for help and how to ask for questions, which I think is important to the board and to the community. And I'd ask for your support at the election on May 21st. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. Tom?
Yes, in my career, I've had the privilege of working for some of the most influential and interesting people in the world. As we all know, Sag Harbor is going through a transition. We have been through this before, and it's time to really unite this community. What we all have in common is a deep love for this special place. And through our love, everyone makes their own important contributions in their own ways. And one way is by supporting our students in our district. In 2004, I ran for the school board. There were 5 of us running, and I received 658 votes. I came in 3rd place against 2 incumbents who were amongst the most vote getters during their tenure. They were classy, professional, and served our community for many, many years. There were no politics involved, no finger pointing, and turned out to be one of the most honorable experiences I've ever had. I was also interviewed almost 2 years ago for a vacant seat on the board, and the board's decision was a tough one, but a good one, as they chose someone else who has become a productive member of the board. I feel my time is now. This is one of the most important elections in many, many years, and can have ramifications and challenges for years to come. I will serve my teachers, administration, superintendent, community, and students with integrity and transparency. There's an ancient proverb that says it takes a village. I've been under, that's the way I grew up here. So at the end of the day, here's a question for all of us. So at the end of the day, isn't it all our responsibility to educate and graduate and send our students out to achieve their goals in life and be successful in what they want? Isn't that what it's all about? Let's send them out.
Thank you, Tom.
Thank you.
Julian?
I'll try and do a brief roundup at the end, but there are actually, there's a clarification I'd like to make, and there's also something that didn't come up tonight that I'd like to mention. The clarification is, I've talked a fair bit about this idea of special needs hubs and so on and so forth, and early intervention. I want to be very clear about something. everything I've mentioned tonight, my own child is already too old to benefit from. In case anybody thinks I'm talking my own book, I'm just trying to fix a problem. That's one thing I want to make very, very clear. The other thing is, you mentioned graduation. We have significantly improved SAT scores, and we've created this IB program, and that's really, really great. But graduation is a three-legged stool, and the other leg of the stool is college counselling. And anecdotally, I'm happy to be proven wrong, but anecdotally, what I've generally heard from chatting to people is that that leg of the stool is the weak and wobbly one. Probably not because it's bad, but what we may well have done unintentionally is improve the other two significantly and not keep up on that front. I went and looked at the #1 rated private school in America is Phillips Academy, Exeter. I went and looked at their website just before I came out here. It's not a particularly big school in terms of pupils. They have 12 full-time professionals just doing college counselling, and they pay them a lot of money. Now, we're not going to do that. Don't worry. I don't expect that we should do that. But it makes the point that they know how important that is. And I'm sure that there are public schools, like Manhasset and Jericho and so on, who do pump a lot of kids into really high-end colleges who understand the dark arts of counselling. And I'd like us to really look at and study that, because that could be a very important missing piece of the jigsaw puzzle. Other than that, with 21 seconds left, all I can say is thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian. Jorgis?
Yep. I wanted to thank again everyone for attending this event. I wanted to thank the Sag Harbor Express and the PTSA for organizing this. We've been doing a great job at this school. I think we need to keep looking into the future of what we can do better. We have to keep providing training and education to our teachers, because that's going to translate into our kids being better students in the classroom. We have to expand the curriculum. We have to look what's the next big thing in education and how we're going to address and expand on that within the school. At the same time, this is a very special community, and we have to keep the dialogue open with the community, be more transparent, be more fiscally responsible, and look what best we can do for our kids. Again, I thank everyone and ask for your vote.
Thank you, Jorgis. Caleb?
I want to thank you all for coming as well. I'll go back to the thing I hope I can add the most is to help the communication, to be more transparent to people, to get the community involved more. Whatever programs that we need to deal with, whatever crises we need to deal with, whatever expansions we need to deal with. I just feel that the more you are involved in it, the more happy you'll be. And I think that would be my single mission, which reaches out to everything that we're doing. I look forward to be a part of that, because I've got 2 kids and I want to keep them here throughout the entire wonderful process.
Thank you, Caleb. Chris?
I've had the honor of serving on the school board for the past 9 years, and it has really given me the opportunity to get to know more parents, getting to know the staff and the faculty, and we have a wonderful team here, and I feel very blessed that we have this great team. During my 9 years on the school board, I think we've accomplished an awful lot. We added universal pre-K. Many of you may have moved in afterwards, but we didn't used to have pre-K here for free. Now we have universal pre-K in the district, international baccalaureate. We've added STEM programming, so now we have computer coding classes and computer clubs, and these are the jobs of the 21st century, and we didn't used to have any of that when I moved into the district. A lot of different wellness programs. We've really focused on the whole child, and student achievement is for the whole child, not just test scores, even though our test scores are up. And I was at the National Honor Society Awards last week, and I was blown away at where our seniors are going to school next year. We also have increased our focus on career and college and career counseling. So we actually, when there was a spot open, hired a college and career counselor. And since she's come on board, we now have college fairs actually hosted here. And they've gotten really large. I mean, it's hard to get colleges to come all the way out here, but they see the rock stars we have go to the school. So now we have that here. So there's more we can do, but we have moved the needle on those things. We've become under the tax cap the past 8 years, 8 out of 8 years, and yet we've only built on our programming. We've not only protected what we had, but we've built on it. We've had bonds that have improved our facilities. So I think we've accomplished a lot. We have a young board You know, 5 out of the 7 board members we currently have are on their first term. And you want to balance. It takes a long time to actually learn what, you know, to become an effective board member. There's an almost overwhelming amount of information, whether it's state regs and laws and all the contracts, and it takes a while. So what I bring to the table is someone who has the experience and the knowledge and is passionate about this and likes to work with other smart people, and I ask for your support, and thank you so much for coming tonight.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you all for coming. I just want to encourage everybody to please turn up at the polls on May 21st. We have very low voter turnout. The polls are open from 7 a.m. to 9 p.m. And thank you to all the candidates.